fucking G, J to the V, smoke a lot of weed, sipping Hennessy in a limousine.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Life Without Limits. We hope you all have enjoyed our content thus far, and we'd like to thank you for sticking with us. We are super excited because this is going to be our first episode with video also uploaded to YouTube. Today we have a guest that I have known for a very long time. He's an independent contractor specializing in arboriculture, a father, a citizen scientist, Ian Ebow. What's up, Ian? How have you been? Long time no see?
Long time indeed. Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. What have you been up to, man? We haven't seen you since high school. I mean, you've been, where you been at? What you been up to?
Yeah, happy 10-year high school reunion.
That's this year, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Oh, shit.
So, floated around a couple of universities and colleges. Started out freshman year running track at South Plains College up in West Texas.
Nice.
That was awesome. Came back to Lone Star to finish my first associates, went to Sam Houston after that, majoring in business and entrepreneurship. After that, didn't finish that degree, switched over to Houston Community College, got a second degree in process technology. After working a bunch of odd-end jobs in school, decided to join the military. And joined as a chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear specialist. And joined as a reserve. So after training, that's when I started the arboriculture work, the tree trimming, tree removal, landscape, and got into that realm of independent contracting, and then that led into holiday light installation. So that's what I've been doing recently. You can go ahead and find me at flashoutdoorservices.com. We'll be sure to put a link in this bio.
Nice, for sure.
Yes, sir.
So, what exactly is a chemical, biological, whatever job you did in the Army? What is that?
Basically, the job was kind of useless since World War I. We had a treaty agreement that we'd stop using like mustard gas and chlorine bombs as a warfare agent.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, that was your military's response for that type of warfare, including anthrax, other types of pathogens, radiation weapons.
So today, what are those people, like, what do you do whenever you do go? Do you still drill and all that stuff? Because I was a reservist also. For those of you that don't know, I was a Marine Corps reservist, but my job was admin, so I really did a lot of travel claims, cutting orders for Marines, getting them paid and stuff like that. So can you kind of tell us like what those people would do today?
Yeah, so your more hands-on training would be over the summer. You have a once a month, or for a whole month, you would go to a training. And we go to Utah where they were creating and testing early chemical munitions. And we have training where there's apartment buildings and each room is set up as a different home lab, and you have to figure out what kind of agent they're using, whether it's like a fertilizer bomb, they're cooking drugs, or whatever it is. You have to be able to go in there, collect samples, and get out with collecting and documenting the proper specimens.
So it's really like figuring out what kind of chemical agents the enemy might be using against the American soldiers.
Yeah, you want to see what precursors they're using to create that final product and catch them in the act.
Oh, okay. Nice. So are you still currently drilling right now, or is that the Army Reserve's done with?
Yeah, so my contract's over in 2023.
Okay.
So still a couple of years.
So how's that been going with like COVID and everything like that? Are y'all still going to drill? Did y'all do anything with COVID, like whenever that started happening?
Yeah, so we went to virtual drill
Wow.
assemblies. Yes, on Zoom meetings. It was great.
So, right? You don't even have to leave your house.
Right.
You just log in and like, I'm here. So what kind of work did they have you doing then? Nothing.
Yeah, a lot of courses. Sit here, do this like financial class, other safety sharp classes, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So Speaking of COVID, whenever COVID popped off, I noticed you were somebody that kind of got really, really interested into that. And like you've done so much research, I would see you, online, talking to different people and, like keep putting yourself in the comments and arguing your points and they're arguing their points. But, the problem with social media is there's a lot of like back and forth and somebody always wants to be right. But can you tell us a little bit more about like why it was so interesting to you and what about COVID like really intrigued you and got you started going into it?
What really got me into COVID is just being that CBRN training, that military training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like second nature. A lot of people just instantly were, oh, it's like a flu. Like 95% of people are totally fine, like barely symptoms. So it's no big deal. But in today with COVID, we're doing great. Like the numbers are crazy low, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing 3 million vaccinations a day, but it looks like everyone who wants vaccines has got it. So those numbers are like declining a little bit, but so is the number of testing.
Have you been vaccinated yourself?
No, I haven't. So there's another vaccine manufacturer that I'm kind of holding out on called Novavax, and they were supposed to get FDA EUA approval, beginning of April, and now we are halfway through May, and they still have not done it. Like they've had clinical trials, phase 1, 2, 3 in other countries. They've done, and then we had to start over and do phase 1, 2, 3 in the United States, and that ended, I want to say, end of December, and so it was sent to get reviewed and still hasn't got that EUA approval yet.
Okay, so what you're saying is we were set to release vaccines, and then again we had to go through the phases again to re-release to actually get the vaccine out. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah, so Novavax, it's a USA-made vaccine, but the phase 1 trial, since we had already started Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, this one was a little later to get started, so it was sent to another country where it had its phase 1, 2, and 3 trials.
So what is it about this vaccine that has you waiting out for it?
One of the main differences, it's not an mRNA vaccine, and it's made out of the actual, like the real virus particles, not synthetic virus. It's not an adenovirus. It's so they get the virus that they use to put the spike proteins on from tree bark that comes from like Cuba, and so that's the only place where they can get that pathogen to put these particles on to use.
So who kind of led that study and like started this vaccine that seems different than all the other ones that I've heard about?
So they got their start in 2012 with the MERS outbreak.
Wow.
So they were the first one of the first companies making a vaccine for the MERS, which is another coronavirus, and as MERS kind of dissipated on its own, so they didn't even get to bring it to human use, but it was developed.
Nice.
So they just, when this pandemic happened, they just said, hey, you guys still making vaccines? And they're like, absolutely. And so they just picked up right where they left off.
Like, let's hop on the wave and make some money. So the 3 vaccines that are out, what do you think about them? What's your take on them or your personal opinion?
They're all great. Like, if you can go get vaccinated, definitely go get vaccinated.
Why is that though? Like, there's a lot of people out there that are kind of afraid to get vaccines. I myself personally think that I should wait a little longer, just kind of see what happens, because I don't trust a vaccine that's been developed in a year. But you're saying that Novavax has been working on vaccines since 2012. So is that the same thing with all these other vaccines that have come out, or all these vaccines really only been a year and developed in just 1 year?
So Pfizer and Moderna, their vaccines are a new technology. So this is the first time we're using their technology in humans. They've been working on it a decade, maybe 2, using it in animals, trying to figure out how to really finesse it. But yeah, it was just really, Operation Warp Speed, really like futuristic. Instead of 10 to 12 years of vaccine development and getting approval, because of the situation we were in, they were able to just skip animal trials, and get straight into jabs in the arms and look at these results.
Okay. So about Operation Warp Speed, obviously that happened whenever Donald Trump was president. He's the one that kind of enacted that. At that time in the beginning of COVID, like, how do you think we handled it as a country? How do you think, like, everyone kind of responded to it? Like, what's your personal opinion on it?
And the new cabinet we have, I would say they would get the same grade from me as far as response goes.
Okay.
Which there's so much new evidence coming out daily. It's constantly changing. The information that, was relevant a month or 2 or 6 months ago, it's like the exact opposite now.
Wow.
So, I mean, both responses were great. They both had their flaws. And with the research I was looking into, it really led me to come up with strategies that I think would really help with our response as a country and as a state. And that's kind of led me to what I'm getting into now with some new projects coming down the pipe.
For sure. So we'll get into the new projects things a little bit down the road in this episode, but as far as, like, I guess what I'm saying is like, as far as like the lockdowns and the mask mandates, like, we've seen Dr. Fauci go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. As far as that goes, I guess from the top down, do you think that we kind of handled that correctly? Do you think the lockdowns were worth it? And, do you think that actually helped us?
I think if we had the same transparent message across the entire board, things would have been not as
skeptical.
Right.
People wouldn't have been
like
as skeptical.
Questioned,
Yeah.
But, when you have the country's greatest scientists saying, hey, in 1918, we wore masks during that Spanish flu, and we know that this is, we had SARS-1 and then we have MERS and this is another corona.
Yeah.
We're going to presume it's a bigger micron size and only sheds with like on surfaces and micro droplets and not aerosol. And it's like there was those tapes released from Trump by some reporter like from January, February. And he was saying, hey, this thing kind of sucks because it's aerosol transmission.
Yeah.
And it's like, with that being said, mask would be very beneficial. And then Fauci's saying, hey, just wash your hands and social physical distance and you'll be Gucci. And then a month or two later, hey, I just said don't wear masks because we needed them for hospitals. It's like, there were so many people in my neighborhood on like Facebook Marketplace. Hey, we're stitching, crocheting masks or, and embroidering them, just any scarves, anything would work. And so the fact we had those conflicting messages, it really kind of hindered our response as a country in whole.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's just because we're America and it's kind of hard to tell people what to do and tell them, oh, you can't go here and you can't go there because we are such a free country, I would say? Or do you think that's a reason why like they kept sending these mixed messages, or do you feel like we haven't really gotten an answer as to why we kept getting mixed messages?
It's just the science. We don't know those. There's a lot of unknown questions and unknown variables. There's still
like in the beginning of a new virus, right?
Well, even with influenza strains, like we still have questions about how influenza strain are transmitted from person to person. Is it like a lower lung like cough that will produce something that can transmit? And we still have questions about that. So it's like trying to figure this out for this new virus. It's like we won't know this for a long time.
Yeah.
But we have guests on it,
So why now do you think that the numbers are kind of starting to go down? Do you think that's directly related to vaccines, or do you feel like that's like, I know there's the conspiracy theorists out there that be like, oh, it was all bullshit to get Trump out of office and blah 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 blah. So like, kind of what's your take on that?
Yeah. So the number of tests are declining like crazy too. So with the number of tests going down, it's
obviously we're gonna have lower numbers.
Right. So it's in the beginning when it was, there's only a few thousand cases or like 20,000 cases. It's like we're that number is probably tenfold because we just don't have good case tracking. We don't have testing implemented. When we first started the tests, some were, 65, 75% specificity and efficacy. But now everything is, for the PCR, is real tip top shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'll be more seasonal. So during flu season, everyone travels. So Thanksgiving, November, like all the way through Christmas and New Year's, to get around the country, you're going to have those negative tests. So the numbers will probably spike back up. But I think the transmission is still occurring and the numbers are more consistent, and it's just the story being told is different based off the data that we get from the number of tests. And the numbers are going to go down, especially with the number of people being vaccinated.
Yeah. So, like, in the beginning, they were saying, like, oh, this will just phase out. It'll go away, kind of like SARS or like MERS. Do you see that happening with this virus, or do you think it's, like, going to be like the flu, or that's something around to stay?
I think it's going to be something that is going to stay around. As far as it's like fatality rate, I think that's really to be determined, and we won't know until the end of this pandemic, or at least a year or two into it. And those numbers are, like I said, they're really good. They're going down. When you take a screenshot or a Snapchat of what was happening last year, like with MERS, it looked 15% fatality for that virus, and it's like, well, how much testing did you do? And it's like, well, probably not that much. Like, there's probably a lot of asymptomatic transmission occurring, just like with SARS too.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers changing. So like looking at Italy, it was 11-12% fatality at one point in time. So it was looking pretty horrendous, and even in America, it was like 3.5% fatality at the beginning, and now it's down to like 0.03, which is way lower. And
so what do you think that's due to? You think that's due to just the amount of information that's out there as far as treatments go? Like I said again last year, like, they were saying like no to hydroxychloroquine, and like this isn't gonna help you, please just stay indoors, social distance. And now I feel like there's more treatments are coming out, correct? Like where they're saying like if you do this, you can combat it other than just getting vaccinated, or is the message get vaccinated and that's it?
I think the message has kind of been just get vaccinated and that's it. It's crazy because last year was the first year clinicians and like primary care physicians have been hindered on what they can prescribe in their practice for like patients.
Wow.
So some places you couldn't prescribe hydroxychloroquine or other medicines unless it was used for a different ailment other than the virus illness.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the numbers are also dropping just because the amount of testing was increased like crazy. We were having, for a few months, we were right around 200,000 cases a day. Yeah. So we just had crazy drive-through pop-up clinics everywhere, and we're able to test a lot of people.
So is it that the testing, like less people are wanting to get tested even if they are feeling ill, or do you think that there's just less people feeling ill? Like less people feeling sick, like they might have COVID, so they go get a COVID test?
Yeah, I would say that the numbers are just declining. Yeah, mainly because vaccines are here, and the people who were most likely going to get severe illness, which is that elder population.
Yeah,
it's kind of ran its course through there and hit, I would say, a big majority of that population.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it's younger people getting exposed to it and getting infected, the fatality rate is just dropping.
Nice. So, you're not an actual scientist, but you do claim yourself as a citizen scientist. Can you kind of tell us what that means and what it means to be a citizen scientist?
Yeah. So, just being curious and interested. My scientific side didn't really start to manifest until I started the tree company, and hey, there's some fungus growing on here, and is this tree gonna die? Is it dead? And like, what do I do with it? And I'm like, well, let me go get my arborist to verify. But man, that's you can't get like free estimates all the time from arborists.
Mm-hmm.
So I just learn these traits along doing jobs and tree trimming, tree removal. Um,
Well, that's like the beauty of living in today's world is that like there's so much the access to information is easy. Like you don't no longer have to like go to school. I guess you could say to like get that information. You can download books online. Like if you're willing to pay for them and study them yourself and look into them, you can just kind of find out all this information on your own. Um, so is that kind of like something you did? And like what kind of scientists that have the actual degree like do you follow and listen to or stuff like that?
so Texas A&M has a really awesome ag program and like arborist program. Um, so I would, take dirt, soil samples, collect, leaves, and send them off to get sequenced and analyzed to figure out what kind of fungal infection or even bacterial or viral or insect infection that these trees or like a yard had.
Yeah.
Um,
So this definitely isn't something that you were just making up on your own, like, oh yeah, this is this fungus or whatever. You were actually sending it off to a lab to get studied and for them to come back and tell you, yeah, this is what it is.
yeah. And
So were there a lot of times like you made predictions and like they came back and told you were correct?
um, Usually the predictions are is that I would want to brag about is like what's the best course of treatment for your yard or the tree's health. And being accurate in that realm is kind of what I'd be happy about because coming with the results I was getting from TAMU, it was, hey, we recommend this treatment or this brand, but it's like if I can get the same NPK product from over here, I'll just get this one.
Nice.
So and then that branched into mycology too, because it's some mushrooms you have a symbiotic relationship with these trees. Some are detrimental. So trying to figure out which is which, it was like, man, this is very interesting stuff. And then that got me involved into bees and that whole ecosystem kind of was playing a role into the tree's health or the yard soil landscape health. And it's led me to reach out to Humble ISD and talk to some people over there, and we're actually getting a apiary program set up. So this is going to be the first time Humble ISD has a bee program in the ag school. So now kids are going to be raising bees alongside lambs and steer and bunnies and stuff like that.
So are you heading that project on your own, or do you have somebody that's helping you, or?
No, so I'm not heading this on my own, but definitely one of, I would say like because I'm not a teacher, but I'm getting a teacher certificate just so I can be teaching at the school and heading.
Teach part of this.
Yeah, because apiary, it's not a degree, it's more of you're a self-proclaimed like Ariapis after you've been doing it for a decade or so or even longer. So I'm working with someone who has
a teaching degree already.
He's a chemical engineer and he has his own farm and he works for another school district. So we're going to be kind of co-heading this project for Humble ISD.
That's awesome. Shit.
Yeah, and that's one of the many projects coming down the pipe. I have a few that are more of COVID related. If you want to talk about those too.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about them and just bring it out.
Okay, sweet. So there's some real advancements happening with our technology. So one thing I've found is, everyone has issues with the tests. They're not accurate. It takes 2 or 3 days to get my PCR results. And we have the technology now that these PCR tests, that nasal swab, will tell you it will tell you if you have the wild type virus or up to 4 variants of interest or variants of concern.
Okay, what's the difference? Let's pause for a second. What's the difference between the wild virus and these 4 variants that you speak of?
Okay, so a variant is a nicer way of saying a mutation.
Okay.
Usually with mutations, it's a big change in what you see the first time you're exposed to a pathogen and the second time. So every year the influenza virus has those mutations, and that's why we get new vaccines. With SARS-CoV-2, there's no real big changes in its mutations. It's basically 1 or 2 genes that, AT or GC type of change, and then they're calling that one a variant, and it's like it's the same exact virus. Like there's the evidence of it's more transmissive. I think that's more of a founder effect, and it's like places are just able to get the capacity to do their gene sequencing and analyzing to figure out what strains they have in their community. And it's like, hey, if you have a big church gathering, baseball game, something like that, and it's, someone shedding, and then it goes to the whole park, like now that virus is going to be spreading across the entire city, and it's like more dominant. And it's like, is it more transmissive, or was it just right place, right time to dominate that area? And I think that's more of what it is. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, that does answer the question. So I actually had a talk with somebody the other day who's like a really big conspiracy theorist. They literally think the earth is flat and all this crazy stuff. But he was telling me about this shedding thing that you're talking about, but that people who are vaccinated can shed the virus to you or get you sick or something like that. Is that true, or is that something that's false?
That's 100% true. So, and this is the military's studies who have done this. So at first, the CDC was recommending 14 days of quarantine if you're positive, and then the military did their training and said, hey, after 10 days, no one's shedding. We can bring it down to 10, and then finally it was brought down to 10 a few months ago by the CDC.
Down to 10?
10 days.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Like officially.
Officially, 10 days, a 10-day quarantine. But when you're shedding the virus, the window of shed is very minuscule. We're thinking it was a week or 2 weeks that you shed. It's actually 1 to 3 days. So it's a very small window, and it's usually all asymptomatic. So you get exposed, within a few hours you start shedding, and you do that for 1 to 3 days. And then it's usually around day 5 to 7 when you have your first symptom. So by the time you feel sick, if you're, especially if you're young, like you go get your PCR test and it'll be like negative most likely.
Yeah.
And that's
because I've had friends that have done that. Like they've tested one day, tested positive, and they were like, "But I feel fine, blah blah blah. Nothing feels really that bad." And then like 2 days later, they're like, "Man, I don't know if I trust that. Let me get tested again." So they get tested again, and then they get a negative test. So is that kind of like the reason why that happens?
So that could be a false positive, which there is, that window does exist.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could have just been an asymptomatic case.
Nice.
And 85% of people don't even, it is like a mild flu-like symptom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably most likely what it is.
So other than that, back on this track of future projects you got going on. So what else is coming?
So one of the there's 2 companies I would say spearheading the next generation sequencing, especially with the multiplex PCR. Now that is really nice. So the multiplex PCR, instead of just telling you negative, positive results, it could tell you up to 35 tests in one nasal pharyngeal swab.
So like it could tell you if you have the flu or COVID or other viruses like that.
Up to 35 respiratory pathogens.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's that's what it's been pushed to so far. We don't even know where the ceiling is. That's how relatively new this is.
Wow.
So one company has done it, and most companies that do this PCR testing, they are set up to do singleplex PCR. And so with singleplex, you're limited to 5 tests max. Mm-hmm. And so one company, they did the wild type and then 4 variants of concern.
Okay.
So, there's the UK variant, South Africa variant.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, there was a new variant found in College Station.
Oh, wow.
There was a variant in India, and they're calling that one a double mutation. Right.
What's that mean?
I want to say that's more of news, like scare tactics or like clickbait type stuff. I don't think it's a
double mutation.
Right. That's what they call it. So
there's these PCR tests. So what else? That can test up to 35 viruses at one time. And so what other kind of future projects are happening?
So sticking to PCR, this is something else that's really crazy. So another company, hey, in Texas, we like to eat chicken, and I'm giving out some free chicken. So, with this PCR test, it has immune response markers on it. So now we can see, or it'll predict who is going to have a severe or critical case in the next 5 to 10 days, and basically predict who will be hospitalized. So this is a game changer. Like usually to get this type of results, you would need a blood sample drawn and then analyzed. And right there, it's like you're looking at hundreds of dollars to get that done. And not everyone is, our medical system's not set up to do that for everyone. So the fact that we can do this now with a nasal swab, it's a game changer.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah,
that is insane. So is that going to help with like that course of treatment that person gets, or like, hey, let's hospitalize this person earlier so we can start helping them before it does get super serious?
So it's beautiful. You at that point, then now the doctors or clinicians, they have the, they're not behind the wheel, and that's usually the case when you're going into the hospital. It's, man, 2 or 3 days sooner we could have provided this and you would not be in this situation. But now we can provide prophylactic medicines, and a whole plethora, like a huge menu to choose from as far as what treatments would be best to keep you from going to the hospital. And that helps with, preventing the disease and the community burden, really.
Yeah.
And, it's a game changer.
No, that is a game changer. Mm-hmm. So what other kind of future projects? Is there any more other than that? I feel like you told me you had all this stuff.
So this is still with Project One. So, and with this project, it's, they don't call me the Flash for no reason. I went to the future and came back, and this is just what I was able to gather. So we're gonna take the concept of finding variants and then combine that same test that has those immune response markers and merge it into one OG multiplex PCR test. And that's the final product for COVID-19 that I want to wheel out. And the fact that it does 35, this test is going to be looking for co-infections also. Mm-hmm. So with up to 45 to 65% of people who are tested in some cases, they have co-infections. So they're in the hospital with COVID and they'll have a fungal infection. And there's multiple different fungal infections that are occurring. Mm-hmm. So this test is going to have a wheelhouse to detect all of that, to really help guide the clinicians on what they should use for a treatment.
Yeah. So where did you get this information from? Like, where is it from? Like, who's putting this out there? Where can people find that?
The year 3000.
No, for real though. Like, honestly, these are just your predictions, or is there a scientist like that has a degree that's actually that's actually saying this, or like where are you getting all this information from?
So in Texas, we like to eat, and in Texas, we're humble, and we give out free chicken. So I'll let you in on this. The doctor that's created this technology to find these immune response markers, he works with the NIH, and talking to licensing officers who, are in charge of saying what companies can and cannot use this tech. Mm-hmm. I've been just annoying them over the past year, just being hyper focused on this. Yeah. And I was able to sign an NDA. I got to the end of some of these licensing officers, like the end of their realm of like expertise on the subject. Mm-hmm. And then I was able to actually meet with the doctor who's spearheading this, who has a patent on this immune response multiplex PCR technology. Okay. So I've been able to meet with him and pick his brain on it and figure out ways to further enhance what he's already done, because that's what the NIH is wanting to do. So if you have ways to, enhance these tests, and it's not just limited to SARS-CoV-2. Yeah. This is for other genetic and infectious diseases also.
So you did all this, and you didn't even need like a degree to do it all. You just had this information and this knowledge and this theory, and like just kind of presented it to them, and they sort of like took you on in a sense, and were like, okay, like let's see what you gotta say.
Took me on? No. But the information is out there, and it's, you have to just get on the grind
and just really research for it and look for it.
Exactly. And you find like, whoa, is this thing real? Like, how can I get more information on this? Why aren't we doing that? And that's mainly where I've been. I've never had an objective or a goal in mind.
You've just been interested.
Right. And it's led me to find these new kind of niches.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is like the CVS pharmacy, Walgreens, they all have PCR tests, like CLIA facilities set up in their facilities because they're doing vaccines and they're doing the PCR testing there too. And it's like, what do you mean you got funding from the government to get these systems in place and hire LVNs and RNs and clinicians so they can perform these tests, and you give them a limited capacity? And now it makes my job harder trying to distribute this future tech because they're doing singleplex PCR and not multiplex PCR, So that's the first project.
Okay, what else?
So there's a lot of issues, right? So there's so many issues. So long haulers in the UK, there was a report that came out and they're treating COVID long haulers like nothing. They're saying that
these are people that are getting the virus and they're sick for months at a time, correct? That's what a long hauler is, or what does long hauler actually mean?
So the term means you have symptoms that manifest, and I don't remember if it was 60 or for 90 days, but that window, you're considered a long hauler once you pass that threshold. And it could be migraines, you're just lethargic, kind of like lupus patients when they are having like a flare-up. It's a whole plethora of different attributes that you get when you are in that category.
Yeah.
So there's some awesome technology, which the future is looking just super exciting, as far as medical goes. So there's these handheld ultrasound technologies that we can use to do patient imaging on your heart, liver, kidney, organs.
Yeah.
And what we want to do with this new tech is find that asymptomatic damage because
like COVID lung is a term we hear out there a lot of people who are asymptomatic, and then they go in for like a CAT scan or a scan of their lungs, and they see that they're just like severely damaged as if they have been smoking cigarettes for years, right?
And also it kind of looks like a pneumonia pocket is occurring in your lungs, and even with your heart, myocarditis is occurring. So it's when you have your heart is inflamed, and the experts do not know yet, is it due to the virus being present and propagating and growing in your tissue, or is it an overactive like immune response, or like the term cytokine storm?
Yeah.
And it's too soon to tell yet.
What's a cytokine storm?
It's when you have like an overactive immune system.
Okay.
And it just basically, that overactive immune system causes damage to your own organs and tissue.
Nice. So as far as treatments goes, what kind of other treatments, if you don't feel like getting vaccinated, do you think that we could take to combat this virus for those that are worried about getting a vaccine? Do you think there's any, or no?
I mean, it's like there's plenty of articles and places to go to find medicine, but I don't want to give that input.
Give advice. No, I feel that. I feel that. I can definitely see why. So other projects that are being worked on, what else is there?
So with ultrasound imaging, there's 2 clinics, one on the south side of Houston, and they are one of the first clinics to start a phase 1 trial for specific long hauler COVID patients. And so they're doing MSC cell therapy, mesenchymal stem cells. And what they do is they take a teaspoon of your belly fat, they put it in a bioreactor, like reverse age that fat so it turns into a stem cell and it gets to that age. And then it's kind of like dialysis. You go in for your treatment, they draw your blood, they mix in those stem cells that they've been propagating, and then they give you the blood back to you. And so, you know, right now we're trying to figure out, does the vaccine help long hauler patients? And it's a 50-50 on that.
So
So
is this
far.
something that we're gonna have to see, like kind of play out for a while and kind of see if the vaccine helps long haulers, and then kind of go from there?
Yeah, so we'll see if the vaccine will help. There are clinical trials to see if it does have an effect. And the data that's come out so far is 50% of the people feel the same, 20% of the people who are vaccinated that are long haulers feel worse, and then 30% feel better. So you can't take any exactly. There's a lot of more research needs to be done. And so with these stem cells, we want to see if we can identify any of this internal damage. Are the stem cells helping regenerate that tissue? Okay. Because your muscles heal, they regenerate, but like if you damage your heart, your lungs, you'll develop that scar tissue. It's really hard to heal.
So this isn't technology that can just really be for COVID. This is like state-of-the-art technology that could change people's lives, like whether they have heart disease and things like that.
It has the potential to be used in that category. I think so.
Nice. Well, shit. So anything else? Any other kind of projects? You're blowing my mind right now with all this like information that I've never heard before. So,
yeah. So there's some very exciting stuff happening in space, and we're here in Space City, Houston. So I gotta represent. Yeah. So
space stuff that has to do with COVID, or just space stuff in general?
I'm finding threads. It's just a lot of interest. So there was some projects done. They had some rats in space. They had them in a full body X-ray where they could identify their muscle mass and bone mass. Mm-hmm. And these mice, they lose bone mass after 90 days of being in space.
Oh, wow.
And we're trying to have humans back on the moon in 2024 and establish some colonies on Mars right after that.
Yeah.
And so if there is a bone density that's being lost, which we already know happens in animals, then that means we're going to have some issues with our immune system, because our bone marrow is where our B cells are, our beta cells, and they're a nice contributing factor to our immune system. Okay. So we're going to have to figure out ways to adapt to these different climates.
In essence, where if we did colonize on Mars, or put people on the moon for long periods of time, we would just be creating weaker humans if they come back to Earth.
Oh yeah, it'd be like walking around with a 100-pound vest on like 24/7. I'm assuming, if not, something more than that.
That's crazy. So where do you think we are with COVID now? Where do you think? What do you see for the foreseeable future? Like, what's coming next? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, another really good question. So in the future, I see this kind of blending in with other diseases we have in our communities, other cancers like Alzheimer's. I feel like it's going to blend in there. Mm-hmm. And who really knows what it's going to look like in the future? But in 2045, like 50% of all the Alzheimer cases in America are going to be made up of Black and like Hispanic communities. And same with cancers. It's on the rise. It's going to be just increasing and being exacerbating and having a more impact with that community disease and community burden. So regardless of what is going to happen in the future with COVID, we still have these issues that need to be tackled. And so these multiplex PCR tests, they can be enhanced and equipped to identify early signs of cancers or tumors or other genetic or infectious diseases. So if we can identify these earlier, we have a chance to really reduce that burden. So that's the end goal. And what happens in the future with it, I don't know. Maybe it'll dissipate like SARS-1 and MERS. Maybe we'll have another one in another 8 years.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I think it is going to be around seasonal, because there are already a handful of seasonal influenza cases.
Yeah.
And another Snapple fact, like 25 to 35% of the flus that we get during a regular influenza season are actually already coronaviruses,
Oh, okay.
says Dr. Fauci.
Should we really trust Dr. Fauci? I guess we'll leave that one up to y'all. So, yeah, man, fuck. My mind's like fucking blown right now. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm like, what the fuck? You gave me all this fucking information. I'm like, just trying to absorb it all and think of another question to ask, or like, because I just want to know more. But how do you think we're responding to it now? How do you think this administration is kind of responding to the virus? And do you think we could be back to normal pretty soon here? Like they're saying July 4th. I mean, we see concerts kind of coming back online. We're seeing sporting events, starting. I think the Minute Maid Park actually just opened up to 100% capacity. I believe, there's a few other states kind of doing the same thing. So you think we're ready for that, or what's your thoughts?
I think most medical professionals would say, hey, just give us a little bit more time. If we could keep everything kind of not 100% capacity until middle of summer, they would really appreciate and like that. It's not happening.
Yeah.
That's okay. I think we're going to have, I think Texas is just going to have a lot more events happening. More states are going to have their events held in Texas just because we have the space, the capacity, and we have the stipulations in place to operate like that.
No, that's true. If any of y'all who saw the Canelo Alvarez fight the other weekend, that was in the Cowboys stadium, and that house was packed. And I was like, Jesus, I hadn't seen something like that in forever. And actually, a couple weekends before that, me and my cousins, we actually went down to a bar in Kemah and watched Riff Raff because there was a dude opening up for them that I have interest in interviewing. And so it was good to have that kind of sense of normalcy. It was a little weird though, because like nobody was wearing masks, like everybody was just, packed in there. It felt like pre-COVID days. And so, I don't know if that's a dangerous thing or a good thing. I didn't get sick or anything like that, so I guess I'm okay. But maybe somebody did there. I don't know.
And someone's going to have to open up and people are going to want to continue to do these activities. So if it was my perfect world, what I would like to see in place is more rapid antigen testing, which I had projects for that lined up too. So these are those, spit in a tube, 15 minutes later, you'll get results. And these tests are, $5-7 a pop. I was trying to get some projects together to be vendors for like Minute Maid Stadium, like I said, Cowboy Stadium, a lot of these big venues in Texas, just so we could have everyone who wants to gather in those close proximities. Like, hey, obviously you don't want to wear a mask, especially in the Texas heat. No. But these rapid antigens are where it's at. They are the tests that detect those asymptomatic spreaders.
So then how do you think they would handle that, though? Because I feel like that would be kind of like a problem for people, because it's like you paid money for these tickets, you get there, you get swabbed, you're positive. Oh, sorry, you can't come in. Like, should they be issuing refunds? Like, what? Go hand your tickets to the guy down the street. Like, there's probably going to be people outside waiting, like, all right, I'm negative. Like, who wants to give me their tickets to the World Series or something like that?
Yeah, and because of those situations, I think that's why we don't have all these rapid antigen tests in place. And I was actually working with those rapid antigens first, because that's the big issue, is finding these asymptomatic spreaders and preventing these long hauler events. And reaching out to the FDA, their board, who gives, the whatever companies want to have their tests used for EUA approval, their board wasn't even looking at rapid antigen tests anymore. And it was like, dude, I just decided I wanted to start, like, providing solutions. Why did I just dig into rapid antigens for so long? And now you're saying, don't even worry about them. But if you have a molecular test, send it this way. And it's like, okay, fine, I'll send you a molecular test. And if I'm sending a test, hey, it's got to be the bee's knees of a test. And that's where this new multiplex PCR test is coming in. So, you know, are there situations we're imperfect? Absolutely not. But as Texans, we make the best out of every situation, and we don't just complain about it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, Texans have a really big, good community. You know, we stick together, we help each other out. We're not like all the other weird states. Did you ever see Texas seceding? You think that's a possibility? No?
I mean, anything is a possibility.
True. That's very true.
Yeah, and being lined up in a position to help my fellow Texans overcome any type of adversity that I can help blunt for them is, you know, in the position you want to be in, you know?
For sure. So, sort of how we, as we wrap things up here, if people want to like find out more information or like kind of follow you, you know, they're like, man, this dude's really interested. He's putting out good information out there. Where's the best place to kind of like find you at or kind of get this up to date information from you? I see you a lot on Twitter. So is Twitter the best spot? Because I think you've kind of moved away from Facebook, right?
No. So if you want to reach out, for sure, you can hit me up on Facebook, Ian Ebow. You know, send an inquiry to flashoutdoorservices.com. If you're interested in collaborations or future plans to get these projects started for COVID, because they are time sensitive, feel free to reach out. Before this business, I'm applying for an LLC this coming up week. So anyone who's interested in helping out with whether it be for marketing or wanting to collaborate, become members or, you know, partners, I'm open to conversation and obviously love talking about these sort of topics. Yeah, so I guess on Twitter too, Ian.Ebo. Yeah, you can follow me on there. But usually that's where I go to relax when I'm done looking at COVID paper and COVID research. And it's like my relaxing, it includes just following doctors and medical professionals and epidemiologists and then reading up on their content and what they're saying about it.
Yeah, nice, for sure. All right. Well, if you like what you heard today and would like more information on when we will be dropping more episodes or to stay up to date with our movement, please follow us on Instagram at LifeWOLimits1. Also, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and SoundCloud. We appreciate you all listening. Till next time, stay limitless. Peace.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you for being on.